denizens of the night. Welcome to another episode of the macabre, the terrifying. Tonight, we've got two stories in one. Well, so to speak. Our story opens upon a man with a lead, chasing it down to New Orleans, where he meets a woman in a bar with some information. That scene fades to black and reopens upon Riff, a young student who is high above his school's theater, eating lunch in the catwalk. It's quiet there, and he can enjoy his lunch in peace. But when two students dip into the green room, Riff witnesses something he wasn't supposed to see. And no, it's not hanky panky. This story is called What It Takes and was written by Darren Todd.
Leaving that last time was the hardest. Guess that's the way it always goes, or else it wouldn't be the last. "If you're taking off again," my wife said, "you'll miss things. He'll miss things. His preschool graduation is coming up. Even if that's nothing to you, it could mean everything to him. Later, I mean. But if you're not there, you might as well be gone already." "That sounds really close to a tautology," I said, smiling, hoping my manufactured levity might break through her stolid expression. She sat on the couch, turned to face me by the door, now familiar carry-on bag at my side, like a faithful dog. "I mean it," she said, and then turned back to the TV. It was off, the only thing on screen a gray simulacrum of me framed in the light coming through the storm door, front door already open. I could have shut it and lost nothing. Surely, despite the mountain of hours I'd thrown at research, the only thing awaiting me in New Orleans was another dead end and heat. Plenty of that, where our mountain town in North Carolina barely crested 80. But, as if watching a movie over which I held no control, that gray version of me blew a kiss to the lady on the couch and turned his back for the exit. Idiot. For several of the theater techies at Bernard High, the catwalk served double duty. For some, it was the prime smoking spot. A miasma of stale tobacco hung in the air in perpetuity, overriding the smell of wood and dust. For others, a place to take girls and impress them by tightrope walking a beam 40 feet above the seats. For Riff, it was the quietude he enjoyed. No one needed him up there. Not until a rehearsal or show nights, of course. Then he was all business. But since his mom had gotten sick, home had turned into caregiving, where his every moment went to fetching, cooking, sorting. He seldom complained, but something inside him needed that isolation. So he spent lunch up there, and study hall. If ever students entered the theater during those periods, it was to fetch a forgotten bag or, rarely, to rehearse and get their stage directions down without the other players to worry about. Even then, Riff kept quiet. Never a peep. For one, he didn't want to talk to whoever had stopped in. But if he were being honest, there was more. He liked the idea that he could see them, but they couldn't see him. He munched his way through his third PB&J of the week. Tuna on Tuesday and, a bean burrito from Circle K Thursday? That's right, cold. No microwaves up in the catwalk, though the director had installed one in the lighting room. Interrupting his recollection, someone walked in from stage left, through the crash bar door that led into a long hall off the cafeteria. Two someones, it seemed, and girls. They were talking. Maybe they meant to keep it low, but as they crossed the stage and made for the dressing rooms, the acoustics of the theater carried their voices up and out. Still, Riff hadn't caught enough to understand them. Something about popularity, parties. Boys, maybe? He grew curious enough to move toward the stage, the trek routine enough to give him no vertigo, like when he'd first navigated its bone-like architecture up there. From on high, he could look down into the green room, but the actual dressing rooms branched off of that into a girl's side and boy's side, both fully enclosed, so no threat of seeing something he wasn't supposed to. So he figured. Even from his vantage point, the two speakers seemed to hang toward the downstage wall, leaving him to guess at who they were. His town had no middle school, so it was right into high school at 7th grade. The result was a fairly large school with tons of different academic levels, so it seemed likely he wouldn't know them even if he could see their faces. "Do you even take theater?" one asked, voice apprehensive, shaky even. "No," came the other, far more confident. In fact, from that single word, single syllable, Riff knew who was in charge down there, who would lead that conversation, which, for some reason, needed to happen in the green room between two students who weren't even theater kids. "It's quiet here, and I need you to understand me. I don't want to compete with some idiots shouting at their buddies across the caf because they're too lazy to get up." "It is loud in there," said the mousy one. Riff could make out enough of her head to see she had black hair, long and straight, not styled as far as he could tell. Which of the two she was became obvious when she kept whipping her head around for fear of exposure. Just so she didn't look up. "This has to stay between us, no matter what. And I'm not talking about something you'll want to tell people, but won't because you're afraid of what I'll do. That's predation." It's what?" the mousy one asked. "Predatory, like if I were a bully. I'm not. This won't be that kind of arrangement. You've heard of remoras?" "No. Who's that?" "Not a who, an it. A creature. The remora clings to the bottom of a shark, riding it like a bus. It picks up the scraps of the shark's kills." "Like a parasite?" "No," the other said, again with a single telling syllable. Not the bitchy voice of someone losing patience, but not at all like a peer either. A tone he'd have expected from a teacher. More authority than that, even. A principal, even the superintendent, whenever she made her quarterly visits and spoke to the class. "The remora actually cleans parasites and dead skin off the shark, keeps it healthy. It's mutualism. That's what this will be." Riff craned his neck enough to see the one in charge passing her fingers in something like the Scout's honor gesture between them, her other hand on the mouse's shoulder. "So," the mouse asked, "which one of us is the shark?" Sure enough, the French Quarter stank, despite the multitude of shopkeepers hosing off the sidewalks. Not even 11 o'clock, and the water was steaming off the concrete, creating a cloud layer at street level, pushing the humidity up to 100%, surely. Lafitte's blacksmith shop looked an awful lot like a bar, though now it made way more sense why my contact wanted to meet there. I'd envisioned a niche craftsman shop, but despite its apparent age, the place was all about the booze and fairly crowded. I'd already donned my Tar Heels cap to block the sun, so Tara must have spotted me the moment I walked in. Everyone else clad in sports gear wore Saints. I just scooched into a high-top seat when she came over. "You buying?" she asked. Despite the heat, she wore a scarf, which she'd mentioned as a way of marking her. The red fabric was so thin it turned a lighter pink when backlit. "I can, sure," I said. She propped a bony elbow atop the table, open hand lazily pointed my way. I went to shake it. "No, I need money, though it's nice to meet you and all. They don't do tabs here." I fished for a 20 and handed it over. She turned on her heel for the bar without another word. I put my soft-sided briefcase on the floor to save room on the small tabletop, but pulled out a folder detailing our correspondence so far. Not much, really. An investigator I had on retainer out of Biloxi came across Tara somehow. Either he was really good at his job, or my reward money had cast an effective enough net to haul something in. Tara returned, carrying 2 large plastic cups of cherry liquid, so full that little splashes made their way to the floor as she pivoted to avoid the other patrons. She put one in front of me, already sipping at the other. She made an affected "ah" sound and smiled. "No change with the tip, but they're worth it. Best damn hurricanes in New Orleans." I took a drink, bracing for the sugar shock. But no, this one was easy on the sugar, high on the booze, and damn drinkable. "You're right." She smiled again, though she kept her teeth hidden and the smile faded quickly. "You live here?" I said, half asking. Her pronunciation, Norlands, gave it away. "Guilty," she said, "though not a native. Was passing through back in '08, I think. Got stuck." "What do you do?" That smile again, though now it had abandoned mirth altogether. "We ain't on a date, are we? Why don't we get to it?" "Okay." She slumped forward, those bony elbows on the table, hands wrapped around her drink, probably soaking in the coolness on an otherwise miserably hot day. "Look, I'm sorry. I just don't like talking about it, so I don't." "I get it." "I'm a bartender. Not here." She waved a hand around Lafitte's. "But not far either. Tourist spot, close to where it happened." She raised her eyebrows and took another drink. "Not close enough, I guess. Still, must have been a dozen people in there that at least knew of me, as a semi-sort of regular, you know? But none of 'em well enough or wasn't paying attention enough to keep me from leaving with her that night." "Do you think she knew you were local?" I asked. "No, but maybe it wouldn't have made any difference. But if I'd have been with friends, or it'd have been more obvious that I knew people at that bar, then she'd have moved on." She shook her head and took another drink, this one putting the cup half empty. "Feel kind of stupid about it, I guess." I took a drink myself, trying to keep her talking. "Don't feel dumb. She's dodged me more times than I care to admit, and I know what to look for." "Why are you after her?" I shrugged. "I knew her, know her. It's been a while. Still, I just don't want what happened to you to happen to other people." "Has it?" she asked. Her long fingers played at her scarf. "Yeah, all over." "I figured it wasn't just here," she said. "I mean, I wasn't looking for her or anything, but I'd have known her if I seen her out, you know? And I'm out plenty, all over the place. And my bar is pretty busy, too. No sign of her." "Until recently," I said. "Yeah, almost a year since she hurt me. Like almost to the day. I saw her at my bar, but there's more than one of us working, and thank God. If she'd have come up to my counter, I'd have freaked out. Whether she'd have known me or not, she'd have remembered once I freaked out, no kidding. Nah, I seen her from across the bar, getting a drink from Richie." "She see you?" Tara whipped her head around, as if imagining that someone was watching just over her shoulder, that catching someone in the act might just save her this time. "I don't think so. I mean, I wanted to leave, of course. I had someone who'd have covered for me and all. But even after watching her from across the bar for like an hour or so, I could tell she wasn't there for me. Even when she kind of scanned the bar, she didn't stare directly at me, you know." "Did you look the same?" Tara shrugged. "Mostly, but I've been a customer that night for one. I was drunk, alone really, dressed different. But it was a whole year ago." "But you don't think that's the entire reason," I said, and took another long drink. She shook her head. I think she forgot about me 'cause there'd been others like me. Others before, others after, and maybe a whole lots more after that night if I didn't figure out what to do about it. How'd you come across my guy in Biloxi? I asked. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad you did. Just curious. She downed the rest of her drink, pulled the scarf down to reveal 2 angry red scars, the size and shape of old piercings, but atop the jugular, where no tattoo parlor needle dared to tread. Not a lot of people looking for vampires, she said, and held out her hand again the same way. So you want to know where she is, right? Where she's staying? 'Cause you pay up, and I'm gonna light out for a while. Don't know exactly where I'll go, but I guess it'll be someplace she ain't likely to turn up. For several minutes, the confident girl, the one in charge, had been talking the mouse off the ledge, or maybe out of her hole. In that time, Riff had moved, silent as a mouse himself, along his beam in the catwalk to gain a better vantage of the girls. He saw that the leader was actually smaller than the mouse, though not by much. She wore her hair pulled back into a ponytail, but held in place with something invisible, not one of the frilly scrunchies color-coded to her shirt like most other girls. Of course, it would have been pretty boring if she had, because her t-shirt was plain white anyway, void of any brand names or logos that Riff could make out. She wore jeans, but with the ends open atop conservative tennis shoes, instead of tight-rolled over high-top sneakers. Still, only a fool would have thought she was boring or plain-looking. She should have been. Should have looked about as plain Jane as possible, but Riff would have seen her in the halls and instantly understood through some invisible calculations that she was popular, or could be popular, which is almost the same thing, especially for someone new in their class. But the other girl, the mouse, she wasn't new. He recognized her, if only just. Cindy or Mindy or Mandy or Sandy, something like that. A cute enough face, but where plenty of girls wore Guess shirts over denim shorts and Converse All-Stars, on her it looked fabricated, like she'd found a costume in the closet and was trying it on to play a popular girl. In answer to his unspoken inspection, Miss Not-So-Plain Jane said, I can make you popular. Easy as pie. So if you're worried about my end of the deal, don't be. That's the simple part. You've done it before? The mouse asked. I've done it before, Jane said, a dark tone to her words, suggesting an exhaustion at the very notion of whatever exchange was happening. You still haven't told me what you want, the mouse said, but her tone had shifted as well. Not one of exhaustion at all, but of unmasked interest, acceptance even. Riff could only guess what might end up being the other part of this trade, but he considered the deal sealed already. You'll think it's odd, Jane said, and moved closer to Mouse, into her personal space. The other girl slid back a few inches until her calves made contact with the old couch in the green room, where her backward shuffle ceased. But remember, it's business, just a part of our deal, our mutually beneficial relationship. Okay, the mouse squeaked, but she tried backing up another step and instead slumped down onto the couch, looking up at Jane as the other girl edged even closer. Jane leaned over Mouse. It's easier if you close your eyes, she said, tone flat. Mouse complied. Lean your head back, like you're looking at something on the ceiling. This made Riff's heart kick into overtime. From his angle above them, even if Mouse opened her eyes now, he might have remained hidden. But it had all stepped into the surreal. Like looking any longer would ensure discovery, but backing off risked alerting them anyway. What could he do but stay as quiet and as still as possible? But what was he about to witness? What on earth was easier from such a vulnerable position? He considered that Jane was about to kiss her, but then Jane seemed like the kind of girl who wouldn't have problems kissing whoever she wanted, one who wouldn't need to trick or promise anything. Then, in the utter quietude of that still air, a sound like pulling the core from a cut apple, a wet and plunging noise. Jane grinned widely, slowly. Only after a few seconds, Riff discovered it wasn't a grin at all, but an unsheathing of her teeth as her lips retreated, revealing the source of that sucking sound in canines at least an inch long, amid a sea of perfect white teeth descending to the mouse's throat. A voice inside him said to call out, to stop whatever evil deed was happening below. Not just because he was its unintentional witness, but because it felt profane. An exchange of life force he'd seen portrayed in movies 100 times, from the black and white films of long ago to theater blockbusters he'd watched, wrapped, that year. But now, the stakes real, even among two people he didn't really know existed until 10 minutes ago, his every instinct said to shout out and demand Jane stop this. But it was a board that undid him. Just a creaking board, tired of bearing his weight. The grumble it let out stopped Jane dead, and her head whipped up, scanning the catwalk before Mouse had even opened her eyes. When Jane's eyes found his, those fangs still exposed, mouth hanging open, leaning over Mouse like a predator, claiming absolute dominion over its prey, he turned to stone. Even his breath ceased flowing, despite his hammering heart demanding oxygen. "You!" Jane snapped, as if instantly recognizing him, if not who he was, what he represented. An interloper in her affairs. An unwitting peeping Tom that had no business in their exchange. Mouse called out, not so much words as syllables of surprise. Jane pinned her to the couch with one hand, peered down at her, and spoke in a gravelly voice deeper than any Riff had heard from his peers, male or female. The words meant nothing to him, but Mouse must have understood their command, if not their meaning, for she went limp instantly, as if shot with a tranquilizer dart. "Get down here," Jane said, eyes again on Riff. "Or I'll come up." Le Hôtel du Jardin Secret held true to its name, a string of French even I could translate. While a good walk from the infamous Bourbon Street, its plain facade hinted not at all at the sequestered courtyard. While open to the air, the 4 floors of rooms contained the cloistered area almost entirely. The only sliver connecting the space to the street was a 4-foot wide wall on each side of the lobby, topped with iron spikes to prevent passers-by from testing their climbing skills. The gardens surely enjoyed the oppressive humidity, and plants wove in and out of walkways, cast iron patio furniture, and a koi pond. I imagined that a virtual tour online would have played up the courtyard to encourage guests, but the only way I could take their measure was to purchase a room for the night. If Tara had come along, she refused vehemently, I might have asked if she were totally sure this was where she tailed her attacker that night, since the only available room was a suite ringing in at $300. I'd have to explain that one to the wife. That kind of money could cover our son's kindergarten school supplies and then some. Wouldn't put a dent in the expenses to come, but hopefully this trip would take care of that. Maybe for good. One benefit the suite offered, on top of a half-decent air conditioning unit, was a small balcony overlooking the courtyard. Sure, out there, the best I could do was blow the cool air of the room over me by putting a fan in the window, but I wouldn't miss a single visitor to the cloister. The day and the booze and the heat had sapped my energy, so I was already nodding off when she entered the gardens. A hypnagogic jerk sent me ramrod straight in my chair, and I hoped the grating noise of metal on metal wouldn't alert her, send her eyes up to my perch, and potentially spoil the whole pursuit. No. Fortunately, she showed no signs of interest, and instead sat at an empty table with a cup and saucer of what I assumed was Café du Monde chicory coffee. I should say she sat at any old table, since they were all empty this time of day. The dinner hour. 6 on the nose, actually, though all notions of hunger left me now, only a long-distant memory of adrenaline-fueled excitement taking its place. I took the stairs around and down, a part of me hoping she'd be gone by the time I entered the courtyard. That was the fear talking. Perfectly natural, if utterly illogical. I'd tracked her for years, in earnest for the better part of 6 months, emptying my savings on chasing leads, paying detectives, running ads that must have looked like gags to most. When I turned the corner of the large stone archway, though, both my fears and my hopes were answered. She was still there, still sitting, small and insubstantial in the iron chair, as if to telegraph her lack of concern at someone's footsteps coming her way. She took another protracted sip of her drink. "How could I have ignored New Orleans?" I said behind her. "You always did like chicory in your coffee." She turned, feet going from tucked up into the chair to the cobblestone floor of the courtyard, pressing and pivoting, circling her around to face me in one fluid motion. The figure grew before me from something fragile, even childlike, to wholly daunting in the fading light of evening. "Hello, Riff." The vampire had ordered him to come down, threatening to pursue him to the catwalk if he failed to obey. But it wasn't Riff's bravery that kept him in place amid the rafters. It was fear. Both created the same effect, however. He went rigid and could only stand there looking down at her, rapid pulse in total juxtaposition to his statuesque posture. She said something else in that low tongue, causing goosebumps to rise all over his arms, but this sounded more like swearing than her command to the mouse. Then, lithe and quick as a startled cat, she moved upstage, behind the scrim, and climbed the stairs leading up into the catwalk. "You're not allowed up here," he shouted, though the words sounded clipped, lacking any air behind them. The idea that his authority as a student techie might hold sway over her seemed silly anyway. Finally, his muscles unlocked, and he moved backwards, the memory of that skeletal space doing all the work. Good thing, as his mind could not have processed any further terror than seeing the vampire come for him. Worry over the narrow walking path, over plummeting to the sea of wooden seats below, would have rendered him catatonic again. "I only want to talk," the girl said. She navigated the thin beams of the catwalk with that same feline grace, hardly looking at her feet at all, not leveraging the angled beams as handholds. He'd have thought she'd spent years threading through such spaces, given her confidence. "I don't want to talk to you," he said, voice quivering. A childlike truth of simple words seemed all his brain could manage. Again, she locked eyes with him, and he found himself unable to break that stare. Jesus, how many books and movies had he seen featuring bloodsuckers, and here he went and stared one right in the face. It was the sort of thing he'd have chided an actor for, if watching this on screen. And yet, at the edges of his gaze, he spotted what the vampire could not, her eyes unwavering, her confidence along that thin beam absolute. A pair of gloves dangled over the beam, worn leather donned by 1,000 student techs over the decades. The director had told the techs over and over to hang them up, but few did. They were for changing the lights. Those bulbs were $40 a piece, and if you handled them with bare fingers, forget that they'd burn your skin if they'd been on even several minutes ago. The oils in your fingers would create hot spots and ruin the bulbs after a few hours. The vampire's tennis shoes might have been fashionable, sure, but they were thin, and a single thread of hope caught and went tight in Riff's mind. His imagination, really. So that when the girl stepped and slipped on the gloves, he wasn't even all that surprised. What surprised him was to find his body responded, lunging forward, holding out a hand as the girl stumbled, struck the beam beneath the chin, and failed spectacularly at trying to grab the scaffold. "I got you," Riff said, his hands the only hope the girl had of not dropping 40 feet down into the rigid theater seats. Her eyes stayed on his, but this time something else came through that gaze. Fear. All sorts of vampire stories existed, many where even such a fearsome creature couldn't weather a fall like that and escape unscathed. He lifted her easily enough. She weighed almost nothing. Or perhaps it was that litheness returning so quickly the moment the slim fingers of her free hand gripped the beam. She was back on her feet in seconds, sending the remaining glove down into the house with a sharp kick. "What idiot put those there?" she snapped. "We used them on the bulbs," he said, head down, unwilling to look her in the face again. It's 'cause the oil in our fingers." "I don't give a shit," she barked, a hint of the low tongue creeping into her English. It caused a frisson across his back and arms, as if the swelter of the catwalk enjoyed an icy breeze from nowhere. "I'm sorry," he all but whispered. "For saving me?" she asked, an adult's sarcasm coating her words. "For spying. I didn't mean to. I was in the catwalk already. It's where I eat lunch. I kind of like the—" "It's fine," she said. "Haley will wake up in a minute and not remember anything. I just—" "What?" he asked, head still down, eyeing the house far below. She sighed. "Now I've got to start over. If she doesn't remember, then she'll probably—" "Not her," she spat. You'll remember. So I've got to start all over somewhere else. Again." She pushed the final word through clenched teeth, revealing her frustration. "Will your parents—" "My parents died a long time ago, buddy. And my guardians are just employees. They do what I tell them, what I pay them for. That doesn't make it any easier." "If it means you won't kill me," he squeaked. You can do the staring thing. I'll let you." She sighed again, the sound carrying layers of exhaustion, beyond the skin-deep impatience he was used to hearing from his peers. "I wish. It doesn't work like that. Not if you... It's for short-term memory. Anything that would end up in long-term memory I can't wipe out." "That's really... specific?" "Yeah, well, I've had a few years to figure it out." As their breathing returned to normal, the quiet of the space up there, the reason it held such appeal to Riff, expanded around them, only the occasional creak of wood or low drone of the lights to fill the air. "So," Riff said, elongating the word, "what happens now?" He risked a look up at her face. She offered a quick, closed-mouthed smile in response, which faded back to the lugubrious frown immediately after. Then her eyebrows perked, and her eyes darted up and to the side. "I don't suppose you want to be popular?" she asked. "What does it cost?" She squinted at him. "I'm quite sure you can suss that out, though I'd keep it as minimal as possible since you saved my life." She stared down, quickly turning her gaze up again. "For the most part." "Would it have killed you?" he asked. "Probably not, but I make it a habit of avoiding unwanted attention, hence the whole popularity for sustenance routine. Healing over hours instead of weeks would have raised the wrong eyebrows. I'm sure you understand that. So, what do you say?" "What if I want something other than popularity?" he asked. Her face contorted to a scowl. "A little young to think like that, aren't we?" Once comprehension dawned, he flushed, waving his arms in front of him despite the precarious perch. No, not that. Something else. Well, she said. What? They rode Riff's school bus in silence. Riff asked if she wanted to use the payphone to let her guardian know where she'd be, but she declined, said it didn't matter. Amid stares and some of the friends he'd made on that route asking if he and Elle were boyfriend-girlfriend, they spoke little of their pending bargain. Once they got off at his stop and began the short walk to his condo, however, Elle spoke up. This is a terrible idea. I owe you, I get that. And you offering up help for the school year makes that double. Still, as someone who's by far your senior, I'm telling you, it's a terrible idea. But you'll still do it? She sighed. Yes. Then I don't really care if it's a bad idea. Terrible idea. I still don't care. Okay, she said, shaking her head and keeping her eyes on the sidewalk. How can you be out here right now? He asked, and pointed to the cloudless sky. I thought... You think that because of a movie called Nosferatu. Dracula is an old book, but it was still under copyright when the movie Nosferatu was in production. They couldn't secure the rights, but they also didn't want to get sued, so they changed some stuff around. Count Orlok instead of Dracula, and he can be killed by sunlight. So that's completely made up? She shrugged. My kind, and there aren't many by design, tend to prefer the dark because of the nature of our diet, but other than that, sunlight does less harm to us than it does to you. I don't get sunburned, for instance. Since melanin is the body's defense mechanism, and I heal faster than normal, I don't even tan. Huh, Riff said, and he squinted up into the sky as if it might provide further details. It's funny, she said. Stoker's estate still sued and won. Most of the copies of the movie were destroyed, but some survived. Apparently enough so that every human on the planet thinks sunlight kills us. We're almost there, he said, and pointed to the last turn into his condo complex. But that's kinda an advantage if you think about it. How's that? She asked, eyes still on the sidewalk. Well, no one who sees you hanging out during the day is gonna think you're not like them. She shrugged again. They figure that out pretty quickly the second someone says I bit them, Riff. That's why I usually keep it on the wrists. In movies, all this weird shit can happen and you roll with it because you know you're watching fiction. The second anything extraordinary happens in reality, and rumor spreads faster than light, and I'm on the next bus. That sounds hard. I'm not after pity, Riff. I left any need for pity or understanding behind before buses even existed. Before sidewalks, for that matter. I'm telling you to hammer home how stupid... She held up her hands. Though completely understandable, your request is. I'm begging you one more time to choose another path. He dug a key from his pocket. It's in here. His key never touched the lock, since the home health nurse was just leaving. Sometimes he'd arrived to find her already gone, and invariably it was those days that he'd hear his mom calling out for someone. No falls yet, thankfully, and she took her meds with clockwork regularity. No, often she just needed someone to fetch water or ice, perhaps flip the tape to restart her meditation cassette. Today, she was already in the living room, atop the enormous chair with the lift beneath it, which she called her throne. Thinking of that made Riff cry sometimes. No one sitting on a throne should have to suffer like she did. Though, as a dark, intrusive thought, he supposed it was well suited when considering that for those around the person who sits on a throne, suffering seems common. Mom, Riff whispered. It's me. I'm home. His mom blinked a few times, as if pulling out of a mental fog, and she tilted her head with some effort, eyes rolling to her son. There he is, she said, the soft words riding her exhale. Mom, there's someone I want you to meet. This is my friend... He suddenly realized that he didn't know the girl's name. Hell, he'd only met her a few hours ago, though it felt like far longer. Extreme circumstances tended to bond people, dilate time. Elle, the girl said, and offered a slow and simple wave to the sick woman. His mother said, followed by a long pause, as if the single word exhausted her. I'm sorry you have to see me like this. Me too, Elle said. I wish we could have met under better circumstances. His mother's eyes rolled to the ceiling, but a smile pulled at her lips. So well spoken. How nice. Mom, Elle is going to try to... There's something wrong with my liver, Elle, his mother said. Ate up with cancer, they tell me. She turned to look at the girl, thin fingers reaching out as if to touch her hair, but hovering a foot shy of Elle's face, either because of exhaustion or propriety. But don't think it's 'cause of drinking. It's not. I never cared much for alcohol. Mom always eats real healthy stuff, Riff said. It's 'cause of bad genes, they tell me. Her mouth hung open. She took a long breath, and her eyes rolled back to the two of them. BRCA, that's the one. The bad gene. You gonna be a cheerleader, Elle? I don't think so, ma'am, she said. When I was a girl, they'd cheer bric-a-brac, firecracker, sis boom bah. She laughed at the memory, which turned into coughs that contorted her face in pain. Don't talk so much, Mom, Riff said. Do you want some ice or tea? Well, BRCA set a firecracker in me, Ellie. And I don't suppose it's long before it'll go off. Don't talk like that, Mom, Riff said. Elle here is special. She's gonna... You look so pale, Riff, his mother said, eyebrows creasing with what looked like substantial effort. Are you eating? She looked him over. And what happened to your wrist? I thought I felt someone's eyes on me, the vampire said. She took a sip from her coffee. Even a half-deaf human would have sensed me by then. Still, my skin went cold at being exposed. Wasn't sure you could drink other things anymore, I said. She shrugged a single shoulder. I can. They don't do much for me, but they don't hurt either. Not much does anymore, I'd guess. I moved closer to her and gestured an open palm to the wrought iron seat across from her. Hurt, I mean. My hands wanted to shake. The adrenaline was treating my whole body like a paint can in a mixer, but I resisted, breathing slowly, making tiny assurances in my mind that I had nothing to fear. She returned the gesture, bidding me to sit. I suppose I have you to thank for that, son, though I doubt you've tracked me down to receive my gratitude. Are you here to try to kill me? Try to kill her, as if trying were my only option, had I decided on malice. I took another long breath, closed my eyes, focused on the flowery smell in the air despite the oppressive heat. I've got cancer, from the same mutation, BRCA. Turns out it's genetic. Oh, that, she said. Her tone suggested that cancer had become a far distant memory for her, along with any human ailment, I supposed. Nothing in her flippancy hinted at her ever carrying the mutation herself, let alone that it had very nearly ended her life before Ellie made good on her end of our bargain and turned my mother. And where is it now, son? Are we just entering the bric-a-brac, or have you progressed to where the dreaded boom is in sight? You remember. She smiled and took another tiny sip, hardly tipping the porcelain at all, the gesture affected, ornamental. Don't think too much on it, Riff. My memories are sharp because I don't carry the burdens of humanity any longer. It's there, I remember. But I also remember every co-worker's birthday, and I haven't worked in decades, so... I never got that relaxed a feel from Elle, I said. Mom laughed, but the sound failed to conjure any nostalgia, though I hadn't heard that laugh, or even her voice, in years. It had changed. I still sensed a humor in it. She wasn't faking a laugh. But I thought we'd find very opposing things humorous now. During my childhood, I always appreciated her ability to find humor in life, even when a single parent with 2 jobs and a latchkey kid helping with bills by selling stationery door to door was certainly not the stuff of knee-slapper comedy. "Poor Elle," she said, though not a molecule of pity lined her words. "It's a hard world for kids, Riff. You had to take care of your dying mother when you should have been out playing. Elle should have been able to leave childhood behind, like we all do. 'Cause this world might feign interest, even fascination, in the machinations of our littles, but when it comes down to it, children are powerless. Always have been. At best, they can leverage their parents, borrow their adult agency. But hers were long dead before I was even born. So, no, I don't think she was all that relaxed, Riff. Would you want to go to school for eternity?" "No." "So, what do you want, son of mine?" she asked. The phrase hit me hard, the ache of nostalgia washing over me like an unexpected wave. I had to remind myself that remembering my pet name didn't mean much, not when her brain worked in ways I couldn't comprehend. Still, she'd said it, had chosen that nickname in lieu of any other words, or none at all. "I want you to turn me," I said. The words had just left my mouth when Mom said, "And why not go to Elle instead?" She had either processed the question that quickly or had anticipated it. I swallowed, suddenly parched, the reflex catching and popping in my throat like an old knee sounding off. I couldn't find Elle. I looked. Figured finding someone like her would be easy. Not impossible, at least. A kid who doesn't age? Lots of schools keep digital records of their yearbook photos now. I even had a computer program do the heavy lifting, but nothing. She took a final sip and inverted the mug atop the saucer. Perhaps she's grown weary of the scholastic life. Her options are limited but not singular. Could wall herself in an estate and play the seldom-seen heiress, perhaps. Even so, she'd need an escort to wander around alone too often. No one cares much about truancy these days, but we're still suspicious of unattended children. Most are indeed far too stupid to take care for themselves. She smiled, displaying perfectly aligned, perfectly white teeth. "You certainly know that firsthand. Gone and made me a grandmother, haven't you?" "You know about Alec?" She laughed, the sound bouncing around the courtyard like the call of dark birds closing in. "No, son, but it's obvious. You want to live to see him grow up, and cancer has a spectacular disdain for any such justice." "So, you'll turn me?" I said. "Can't," she said in an instant. "Why not?" "Don't have the knowledge, son. Elle turned me in private for a reason, I'd suspect. Goodness knows I've bitten plenty, and they tend to stay rather dead." "You kill?" I asked, breath suddenly short. "Even fed my blood to a particularly yummy specimen once, but no luck. I imagine he's far less yummy by now, probably more concerned with his cholesterol than his abs." And she laughed again. "You owe me," I said, close to tears at this roadblock after so many years and so much money searching. "You owe me to try." She smiled again. "I do owe you, son. I owe you an out, the way you gave me one. Only I can't offer the same bargain as I said. Can't really blame young Elle for keeping her secrets. The carrying capacity for our kind is rather small compared with yours." "So what then?" I asked. "You gonna take care of me as I get sicker? You're gonna raise my son once I'm dead? Take care of my wife? Pay my medical bills?" Now it was my voice rising in volume, enough to carom off those old brick walls, dying within our sequestered space without ever reaching the road. "Bric-a-brac, firecracker, sis-boom-ba," she sang. This time, when she smiled and met my eyes, what followed was a sound like suction, of a lollipop tugged from the greedy mouth of a child, and her canines shot out another inch, their surface gleaming. "I know how this ends, Riff," she said, the words now more like a growl of a dog past elongated teeth. "You may be mobile now. Maybe think you can fight this, beat it even, alongside the loving encouragement of your family, your friends, your doctors." She spat the words, a line of drool snaking down from her chin, her hatred at such figures clear. "But you will be a log atop a bed of bright coals, certain of your strength, your vitality, your hope at being able to endure the fire instead of ending up as ash like all the others." She took her feet in an instant, the wrought iron chair flying behind her a dozen feet as if repelled by a giant magnet. I remembered her standing at 5'6", but now she seemed 7 feet tall, atop her pointed toes like a ballerina, but even more weightless, a taut muscle ready to explode with energy. My breath came in rapid sucking and blowing, my heart a haywire machine, forgetting its rational and steadfast programming of 40 years. "You will lose, son. You will suffer like I did, under the yoke of a far crueler parasite. My gift to you, son of mine, behold!" And then she was on me, standing there one moment and at my throat the next. A motion so fast that it would have looked like magic had anyone been there to see it. But no one was. No. As my mother took life from the only child she'd ever given it to, the only proof in the world of another soul was the faint whisper of a brass marching band in the distance.
Oh my! What a feast! As of this recording, that's 2 vampire stories in a row! I bet you weren't thinking it'd be another bloodsucker, were you? Have you ever read or watched Let the Right One In? It was written by Swedish author John Ajvide Lindqvist. In that story, a boy meets a young girl who he later discovers is a vampire. She leads a similar life to Elle, stuck as a child, unable to grow up, outliving her caretakers and moving from place to place. If you enjoyed this story, you'll likely enjoy that one too. Check it out in whatever format is most interesting for you. Oh, and speaking of enjoying this story, did you know you're the first people in the world to hear it? It's part of a brand new collection of short stories called Cul de Sacrifice and Other Stories, which will be out in time for Halloween this year, 2025. I'll add a link to the description and show notes. Please, don't hesitate to check it out. The author, Darren Todd, always spins a great yarn. I'll also include a link to a playlist of his stories on YouTube, so you can hit play and get lost in hours of killer stories. If you enjoyed this story, please let me know in the comments below. Please also leave a like on this video and spread the word if you know someone who might enjoy it. Whatever you do, be sure to take notes during the transformation process and only let the right one in. And of course, don't fall asleep.